Good afternoon and welcome to another Libraries Community Conversation. My name is Renee Battle Brooks. I'm with the Office of Human Rights, and we are pleased to have with us today Allison Flores. She is the County Executive of Prince George's County's Latino Liaison person. And so we are thrilled to explore what that means. So Allison, before I get into the questions that I wanted to ask or the discussion today, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you go to school? What did you study? What kind of led you here?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with you today. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be in this role and to serve the residents of Prince George's County. I'm actually a born and raised Prince George's County resident. I grew up in the Liaison neighborhood, which is part of Northern County. I went to Prince George's Public Schools. Afterwards, I went on to Catholic University in DC. And through an internship, got connected to the county. And during my time in college, I was constantly gravitated towards the county because it's such a gem in the area. And there's so much diversity. It's really such a unique place that, it was constantly my model of coalition building and all of these things. And so after graduation, I worked in the private sector for a little bit and then at a nonprofit. And afterwards, found myself in Prince George's County, and I've been here in a previous role for about 5 years, and in this new role most recently.
Outstanding. Well, welcome to your new role, and we are thrilled with all of your knowledge and experience that you're bringing to this. So why don't we start with that? What is the purpose and function of a liaison, and then very particular, so we can start general, and then very particularly sort of your role. Why does it exist? Why is it important? And what do you do?
Mm-hmm. So it's really like a layered question there, and I'll try to answer each point. But if I miss something, please let me know. So the liaison has a variety of different functions, but to best summarize it, I would say it's sort of the bridge. And specifically in this role, the bridge between the administration and then the community. So liaison provides feedback to the administration regarding on-the-ground issues. And that gives the administration an opportunity to come up with solutions, whether that's policy or budget allocations, that address the issues. Additionally, the liaison informs and connects residents to the county resource available to them. One of the examples that I like to give is, I like to use the example of bulk trash. I've found that, many of us care deeply about keeping our community safe and clean. That being said, not everyone knows that the county offers free bulk trash pickup through 311. And so my job is to educate residents of this free service, but also provide feedback to the administration of the possible efforts that could be made to increase that awareness of the service, whether that's material being provided in different languages, a targeted campaign, et cetera, different things. But although it seems like a minor issue, it's an issue that really connects us all as a county. If we live in the same community and you have trash on your street, that means that affects me. So we're all interconnected, and it's important all our neighbors have access to information in a language and in a cultural form that they best understand. So looking at issues through an equitable lens really improves the quality of life for all of us. And I think that's one of the important things to remember, that even though the liaison is focused in one community, the focus allows the greater community to benefit from that as well. And when it's try to equal the playing field, or just try to bring more folks to the table.
Yeah, I love your example, because you're right. Something as sort of mundane as bulk trash, it really it unites us, right? And it has so many layers. I love the way you wove in sort of the language access component and the cultural competency. I mean, it's all so important, and that we are all the same. Just because we
Absolutely.
may, right, speak a different language, or we may have different things that we celebrate, we are all the same. So thank you.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the name then. Your name, your title. Let's let's talk maybe about the distinction, because I think some hear Hispanic, some hear Latino, some hear Latinx. Like, could you just educate us as to what those terms mean, and what the differences are, if
Mhm.
any?
So I would say that Hispanic is maybe a term that's been used more, I guess, traditionally or in the past. And it really, one, it highlights sort of the colonization that occurred in Latin America and why a lot of countries in Latin America speak Spanish as their main language. Versus Latino really puts the focus more on Latin America as its own sort of separate unit from its connection to Spain and the influence that had on the culture, the language, the religion in Latin America. And then most recently, we have the emergence of Latinx, which is meant to be an inclusive term to sort of neutralize or be more gender inclusive. So for folks who may not identify with Latino or Latina, it's really meant to be a term that brings everyone together in a space that everyone feels like they're represented in, or they're not being forced to identify with one or the other if that's not what they're comfortable or what they identify as. And I'm not taking a position on this issue, but I do think that in addition to the X, it's important to maintain the Latina as well, because as a woman, a Latina woman, there are specific barriers, specific challenges that that are faced by women in Latin America, and then the diaspora. The immigrant woman in the United States that is very gender specific when it comes to the wages, right? To violence, to rights of women, to the right to choose, the right of choice. These are all things that we shouldn't get lost in the mix. That it's really important to still highlight and to remember when we're having these conversations, whether they're policy or decisions or community conversations, just to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, that is such a great point in terms of really looking through that lens, that different lens. So let's start with maybe a little bit of geography, right? Because I think as you were explaining the difference between Hispanic or Latin, right? One encompasses a language and
Mm-hmm.
the other encompasses sort of a region, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic is somebody that speaks Spanish. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean they're from Latin America or
Mm-hmm.
from the Americas, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we in this country, we say we're from North America.
Mm-hmm.
So what countries, Allison, are in North America?
This is a quiz.
It
So what often surprises a lot of folks is that North America is beyond just the United States.
is
Obviously,
shocking.
we love the United States, and this is home for a lot of us. But it also includes our neighbors, our Canadian neighbors further up north. And it also includes Mexico. And one of the things, too, that sometimes is forgotten in the conversation is that Mexico used to be part of the United States until it was, this westward expansion happened and it was forcefully taken from Mexico. And so on the western side of the United States, you have a huge, Mexican American community. You have your Chicano studies that have really, the border really crossed them. And so that's important to remember as well. And the forced assimilation that a lot of Mexican Americans had to endure during that expansion. And so the loss of language, the loss of culture, one may appear to look like something, but may no longer be in touch with the language because you're so many generations in. And so knowing the various histories of both of North America, right? The North America is larger than the United States, but also the histories of Latin American countries and why, some, Latinos aren't new to the United States.
Yeah. And in fact, as you pointed out, along the border, whether it's California, Arizona, Texas, some of the other, our Americans that are living there have been here much longer than it was the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody that's listening who didn't consciously remember or understand, North America is Mexico, United States, and Canada. So when we talk about Central America, right, because we hear these terms, North America, Central, and South, and talk to us about Central America and really how it relates in terms of our fellow Prince Georgians, where a lot of our diaspora from the Americas come from.
Yes, Central America is your countries of El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and I'm forgetting one, I believe.
Guatemala, yep.
Yeah, Guatemala. And the history, of those countries, because it's important for context, I suppose, to understand that those countries underwent brutal civil wars that caused a lot of folks to start migrating up north due to those wars. And then as well, the United States had programs for like temporary visas for working purposes that also attracted folks to the United States. One of the interesting facts that I actually learned not too long ago, actually, is that Prince George's County is ranked fifth with the highest concentration of Central Americans in the entire United States. And that is so special. And it's something to absolutely be celebrated, right? These are folks, these are families who contribute to the local economies, to the cultural tapestries of the county. They're local business owners. They were on the front lines during COVID in some service industries. So they ensured that, that we had food on the table, that hospitals, were running, and that, sometimes the background work that we don't think about was done. And so that's absolutely something to celebrate. It's something where, it's sort of, how do we elevate our neighbor's voice? How do we better understand, connect, empathize with our neighbor? And I think that comes through forums like these, through reading, literature, through even movies or museums to get a better understanding of who's here.
Yeah, and I think when we were going through I think we missed Belize, but
yes,
anyway,
Belize, right. That was the other one.
Yeah, and so when we think about our brothers and sisters from Central America that are now Prince Georgians, we've talked about, more than one country. And maybe if you could sort of take us through, paint a picture. You don't have to go through all of them, but sort of the uniqueness of the different countries and cultures and, even language, right? Because not everybody speaks Spanish, right? So maybe educate us a little bit about that.
So there are 33 countries in Latin America. And although Spanish is the language that unites most Latinos, the makeup of the Latino population varies widely across Latin America and in major metropolitan areas. So the Latino identity is multidimensional. Latinos are a mix of many different influences over time from countries all over the world. And this is why there's no typical Latino. Latin America has Afro Latinos, Mestizo Latinos, white Latinos. And this is a reflection of our family tree, but also a reflection of the social and cultural factors in which we're raised in which we see ourselves and in which the world sees us and how we relate to them and they relate to us. And so, our neighbors here in Prince George's County are predominantly from Central America, and that may influence the way we think of Latinos and who we assume is Latino and who's not. But it really depends in the area that you're in. If you go to a different metropolitan area in the United States, for example, if you were to go to Miami, you would see a huge Cuban community, which you may at the beginning not know that they're Latino until they maybe start speaking Spanish. Or if you go up to New York, to the Bronx, to Harlem, there's a huge Dominican and Puerto Rican community there. And you may also not know, right? And so that's sort of the special thing of Latinos. We're a very diverse community. We come in all colors, all shades, shapes. We practice sometimes different religions. We do have things that unite us, but we're very unique and different as well.
So you mentioned, Afro Latinos, white Latinos, and mestizos. If you could explain that, because not everybody may understand what you're referring to.
I guess I'll just go list them if that's okay.
Sure.
So like Afro Latino is the Afro descendants. So when you look at the history of Latin America as well, when Spaniards or the Portuguese were coming over, they were also bringing along people from different countries in Africa to South America. That's why in Brazil in particular, you do have a huge Afro-Brazilian community, but also to Central America, particularly to Honduras, and in these different places, depending on who was there, everyone mixes, love is love. And we don't, necessarily stick to, we marry across races, across ethnicities and all of this. And so what you have now is also a multiracial community in Latin America that is a combination of sometimes Afro Latino, sometimes Afro and Mestizo Latino. So you have your Afro Latinos, sort of what I just referenced, then your Mestizo Latinos, which is the folks who are native to the Americas, and that's your indigenous people. And unfortunately, some of those cultures were forced to be lost due to the conquesting of the Americas that occurred. But some regions are also, like in Guatemala, you have a huge Mayan community that's also here present in the county that have really preserved their language. They're indigenous, they have indigenous languages, indigenous customs. And so some of them speak Spanish, but they still have their native language. And some of them don't speak Spanish at all.
Right.
And I think that's important to keep in mind as well. And then you have your sort of white Latinos who really reflect the European influences in the Americas, and the forced mixing that occurred when some of the colonialism and all of that was taking place. And so there's even though that's history, it's still very much present in also the socioeconomic status, the access to resources, the lack of access to resources and education and jobs in Latin America. Some of the issues that we have here in the United States are very much present as well in Latin America along these racial lines. And that's important to keep in mind as well when we are when we see Latinos here in America and in the county.
Yeah, you raise a very good point. We recently, within the last probably year, and Kyla Hannington, shout out, who's working the behind the scenes. If you could type into the chat for me to remind me, but Christina Parenza, I don't remember, Cole, I think is her name. and the name of her book, but it really talks about the contributions when you said that when you're talking about Afro Latinos and how many were brought from the continent of Africa. In her book, and I encourage everyone to read it because it is mind-blowing. It's not what we're taught. But she said that Mexico had the largest, there were more people from the African continent in Mexico than anywhere. And so I said, what happened to everybody? She said, I was being cheeky, but basically it was, everybody started marrying, right? Or right, having, right, so that it changed. But it's an amazing book that really is eye-opening about all of the amazing contributions made to the Americas by people of color, and very particularly people from the Africa diaspora. I love this, helping us remember that we shouldn't make assumptions, that if we see somebody, we shouldn't assume they speak Spanish, whether it's because, as you said, they've been in America before America was. And then when part of Mexico was taken, and just sort of, the cultural things were lost in the language, but also because of some of our Native and Indigenous folks who are here and may be from Guatemala or places, but do not speak Spanish. That is that assumption, right? And so we really want to help and serve people. We have to be mindful that we cannot make assumptions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about language. We've talked a little bit about culture, religion. I think that within that, I think most of us, when we think of Latin America, we think Catholic, but that's probably not accurate, as a predominant religion, perhaps. And we talked about indigenous worshiping. So let's shift for just a moment and talk about people and contributions and celebrations. Can you highlight, give us a sampling of amazing people that have contributed, what they did, where they're from, etc.
So one that comes to mind is these two local young ladies who started a an artisan based out of DC. Is called La Horchata. And their goal is to lift the voices of Central American stories, particularly those of the diaspora. They grew up in the area. I believe one grew up in Prince George's County, and they were kind of there's an opportunity here to really share our culture out with everyone and to feel to make ourselves visible. So if you ever get the chance to look at any of their items, I mean, it's fantastic. It's art. It's pop art, graphics, and they're amazing. And they give you such a great window into some of these very popular trendy things within the Central American community, from cuisines to specific drinks and even holidays of sorts. So it's just a great sort of feel good artisan. And that's, again, La Horchata.
If you can type that into the chat, then Kyla can take that and push it out for all of us.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. Another sort of resource that comes to mind is Casa de la Cultura del Salvador, which is a local nonprofit. I believe they also have one in El Salvador, but they have one here in the DC region. They host a variety of community gatherings for artists, art films, history conversations, understanding our past to root us, to give us direction. And it's such a great way to, I think, for Central Americans here in the county to learn about their own history, because a lot of times, unfortunately, sometimes due to the brutality, the wars, sort of this almost like silencing of people for survival. Some of those histories don't always get passed down, and so the identities, it's an organization rooted in rooting people of the diaspora, but also teaching those not part of the diaspora who Central Americans are here in the United States, particularly here in the DC region. And it's a great way for us to this idea of like the Great Migration. Like you have the Great Central American Migration, but you also have migration of African Americans from the South to the North, and sort of why that happened. And so even though it's different, I think there's pain there, there's injustice there, that sometimes isn't talked about as much as it should be. But there's an opportunity to unite communities across sometimes things that divide us. I really do believe that we have more in common, and the more we understand ourselves, the more we're able to understand others, to empathize and to connect with others in this very like deep, meaningful way. Even if it happens neighbor to neighbor, right? Like even if it's small interactions, that's so powerful. That's so powerful. And you can have solidarity and, solidarity, love, for self and for others.
Yeah. I think that we best learn through stories, right? From each other. We can, definitely connect. If you could tell us, like educate us about some of the holidays that maybe we don't celebrate here. Like what, and I'm not saying as a whole, but, particular countries or traditions, maybe shed some light on that for us so we have an understanding and the significance of it.
One that comes to mind is, and I'm sure you've heard of it because they've done movies like Coco now, but Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead.
Yes.
Which is sometimes mostly associated with Mexican culture, but it's actually celebrated and honored by a lot of countries in Latin America. And it's really a celebration honoring and wishing peace on, the loved ones that passed away. And so a lot of times folks will light up candles and say a prayer so that the soul is at peace, so that the soul is remembered as well, so that they know that, that you love them and that you want peace on them, which is a really beautiful tradition and a great way to also keep history alive, keep our ancestors in mind as we, move forward and create families of our own if we choose, to always reflect back and have an understanding of their sacrifices, of their stories, and how we relate to that. So that's one. Yeah. Another one that comes to mind that's also is maybe a little bit more like party is carnavales, which is probably the most common one people have heard of is from Brazil, but also other countries celebrate usually close to their Independence Day. They have sometimes like towns will throw carnavales for their local sort of constituents. And it varies from like parades to music, to dancing, to parties, to beauty competitions. And those are always, really fun. And, folks from here who are able to travel back home, sometimes travel back home just for that purpose, for going to those parties. So those are a lot of fun.
It sounds it. And again, right, tradition and those things that we hold dear really sustain us, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an opportunity to learn, right, in the fun sort of interactive way and very immersive.
Yeah. Any other holidays maybe that maybe more obscure?
Any other holidays?
Or like harvest or something that, others around the world don't understand our Thanksgiving. Like, it doesn't, I lived other countries and I went to school on, it's a nothing, right? We don't,
I find that some of the traditions of the United States, like Thanksgiving, are starting to maybe be embraced, and maybe more through a capitalist lens of like consumer
Right.
and like marketing. But I can't think of a holiday right off the top of my head. I that isn't as commonly known here.
Right.
I'm sure that there is. I mean, each country also celebrates their Independence Days, which is a big thing. Some of them have sort of like revolutionary days, um, but I can't quite think of one. That one caught me
No,
off
but that's
guard.
yeah. No, that's fine because you've actually sort of, described some of them. Are marriage traditions different when we think of weddings or the lead up to it or the way we celebrate or some cultures, the engagement is a huge, family, but are there sort of any marriage traditions that are different or contrast to the ones here?
Marriage traditions. I would say that it depends on the region, right?
Right.
So it's kind of similar to United States. Is some rural communities have specific rituals or like traditions that they'll do to ensure good luck on the marriage, that the marriage is prosperous, that that you have many children, that those almost like I don't know if I want to say superstitions, but very like things where you're like, I must follow this in order to have good luck in this, and to keep away bad energies and that sort of thing. In the cities, I would say that it's maybe more similar to here, where it's a proposal and then a wedding party, of that sort. It could be argued that in America, maybe there's more things that are being added, like an engagement party and like a
Right.
baby reveal gender thing. So,
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. I was just, as you were talking, I was reflecting. One of my friends happens to be German, and so we were in Germany for her wedding, and they have something called the Polterabend, which I think was on the eve of the wedding, where it's a big party and everybody brings porcelain, and they throw it down, and it's like for good luck. And so people were bringing like toilets or parts of, and throwing it in this place that's been set apart. So, I mean, I just love how, yes, we all celebrate different different ways, in this loud, joyous way. So, yeah. So let's move in. Kyla actually just typed in a really good question, as some of the others as well. But so are there any leaders, political, social, creative, that we should know about, that we should learn about? Because I know that there are, amazing innovators and amazing leadership, but educate us.
One that comes to mind is Rigoberta Menchú, who fought for the rights of indigenous people in Central America, and has gone on to do these talks of like preserving heritage, of the rights of indigenous people. I would definitely say she is one to know. Dolores Huerta, a leader here in the United States, who you guys had, and it was fantastic.
I love her. She is amazing.
Yeah, she is phenomenal, and really highlights also the power of solidarity and learning from different movements and empowering the youth as well. Someone else that comes to mind is, and her art is actually right behind me. Her name is Frida Larios. She is a professor, I believe so, at American University. But she does a lot of Mayan art, and trying to preserve these symbols that ground us to the earth, which is what indigenous people survived off of for centuries. And she also does a lot of work with students so that they can learn about Mayan culture, but also how we can use that as a vehicle for activism. And how to get engaged, civic engagement, and how all of these things are really interconnected, and how we're all interconnected as humans of this world. So those are just a couple that come to mind immediately. I am almost certain that I've missed so many, and so I apologize in advance for.
No, again, any sort of light that you shine is more light than we had, so it's great. So towards the beginning of our conversation, you talked about sort of the experience that women have, and maybe immigrant women and some of those challenges. So maybe let's talk a little, let's unpack that a little bit. And maybe as a baseline, before we get into that particular aspect, like, are the roles of women different in Central, South, and North America than in the United States?
I would say that things are changing. That the sort of like traditional notion that women need to stay in the kitchen or belong in the house only, that although that exists still, the increase in access to jobs, to education, to opportunities really allows both women abroad and here in the States to really become agents and independent. And so, that in itself changes the dynamic of why people get married and of the traditional household. Before it was very I guess customary that the man was the breadwinner, and so the woman would stay home, and that's actually how my grandmother was. She never worked. She found her ways, to pawn things and get a little something extra outside of what my grandfather knew about. So we've always been very entrepreneur, very creative. But it really is opportunities, right? Like she would have been a great businesswoman because she was just like quick on her feet. Like, I don't know how she did it. She just, but that's changing. So, I think the more we increase access for girls and women, those traditional roles will evolve. And I think that's something to celebrate. An empowered woman anywhere in the world, including here in the States, is absolutely something to be celebrated, and something that's taken many, many years to get to. And we're still not completely there, but I hope that we are getting closer to a more inclusive, equal society for women. And safety as well.
Yeah. What do you think, if we hone in, just let's say, for instance, Central America, what do you think is driving now maybe more access for women? Do you think it's, minds are changing, or just practical economics, or I don't know, if you, what do you think?
Yeah. Central America still has a lot of challenges when it comes to education. I would say that here in the United States, there are a lot of households who are run by women. And so here, even if, we have a huge issue with the wage gap between Latino women and what a white woman makes. But even being able to access a job allows that woman to provide for her family in a way that she probably couldn't before. So, I read recently a study from Unidos US. And I want to say, I recommend reading it. If you ever just have some downtime to read, I think it's like 30 pages, so it's not too long to get through. But it's closing the Latino wealth gap, building an inclusive economic recovery after COVID-19. And it really gives a blueprint of where Latino women are right now, some of those barriers that exist, but also where opportunities exist to really equal the playing field. And so I hope that those, recommendations are implemented at the federal and they trickle down to local states and counties. But I will say that the times of just women not having options to work or to be dependent are changing, and they've changed a lot with the economy and the ability to find employment here.
Do you think those same things that we talked about here, sort of COVID has impacted all of us in ways that I don't think we have fully grasped, and I don't think we fully know yet how much it's changed the way we do things.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that's also impacted or is a significant impact in Central and or South America?
Yes. Yes. A lot of folks who are from Latin American or immigrants, particularly like first generation immigrants in the States, will send back money, whether to their parents or their children that they've left behind. And with the pandemic, either cutting hours or people losing their employment, that's had a tremendous effect in how much they're able to send back, if anything at all. And so those effects, we can also see some of those in some of the issues that are occurring at the Mexico-U.S. border. You see now, previously, maybe like 2 decades ago, it was mostly men who would sort of make that journey. And now what you see is families, you see little kids, you see young mothers, some of them, pregnant and with children. And one must really think, what leads someone to make that decision, and understanding that that is not a decision that's made lightly. And that if there were other options, you would probably choose anything but that. Because making that journey by yourself is something where the odds are stacked against you. And then to do that journey with children, as a woman, knowing the violence that women face along that journey.
Yes.
And so we must remember that as well, how, again, it goes back to this idea that we talked about at the beginning of we're all interconnected.
That's right.
And so when we're talking about these issues, it's important to look at it from an equitable lens, a lens of compassion as well, because these are difficult decisions and these are people's lives, and I think of, for us, I know for myself, I'll speak for myself. I'm very fortunate. And I think of just any decision that I make, how much goes into that.
Yeah.
And how privileged I am to have the resources here, right? The resources, whether that's county, that's employment, as a young Latina myself, to not have any of that and have kids asking me, what they're going to eat, that they're being threatened by gangs or by corrupt government, that there's not a school, the school only goes up to first and second grade. And then after that, you just repeat those 2 grades.
Right.
That there's no employment, that leads to drastic decisions. And so as a global community, we must, take these things into mind, and how we approach maybe our neighbor. We may not know their full story, and they may be going through a very hard time. Like many times we're ourselves going through difficult times and we don't tell anyone, right?
That's right.
And so that could be going on for someone else. And how can we be an agent of change for someone else? Again, there's, I think, these larger, big policy issues, like immigration that are going on. But we also have such power as individuals to impact someone else and to reach out to be a friend, and that's powerful as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking, reflecting, and you're right. Imagine, and for anybody listening, I would ask, put yourself in somebody's shoes. Like if something were to go completely south for you today, and by completely south, meaning there was nothing, there was no safety net, there were no
Mhm,
programs, there were no resources, possibly no family, nothing like, but you still had some that depended on you. What would you do, right? You would empty your bank account and you'd figure out, where am I going? Am I going to Canada? Am I going to Mexico? Am I going to, somewhere in the Caribbean? Where can I afford to go, right? And you don't make that decision lightly.
mhm,
And so I love this idea about being compassionate, because this is our responsibility to each other as good Prince Georgians, as just good people, right? Understanding one another, and that we don't know what others are going through or living. And so and that journey, I've had opportunity to really talk with people who have made that journey, and it is I am pretty sure I don't have the courage that it takes, right? And you
mhm.
think that some people use their entire savings. I mean, it's a one-shot deal, right? And just the days and weeks of leaving and coming and all of the danger. And as you said, then you for everyone, but then when you think about being a woman, um, and so this thing that you said about, some that have left children behind. Let's focus on that a little bit, because we know of Prince Georgians, we know of communities, our fellow community members who have had to make that difficult choice, because this is the last hope. Somebody has to be able to send money back to be able to, right? So let's unpack a little bit. You've got, my goodness, leaving your child, not because that's what you want to do, but
Mhm.
that's like the last desperate effort. And what does that look like? Reunification, when it happens, if it happens. And let's talk about that a little bit. What does that look like, so we can have people really understand some of the gravity, the severity of our fellow neighbors that are living this life.
Yeah, I mean, family separation is a traumatic
Yeah.
occurrence in someone's life, whether you are the parent or the child.
Yeah.
It will have impacts for generations. And when you think about family separation as well in the United States, it's not a new concept,
That's
but we've seen the negative impacts that it has on children particularly. And so there are a lot of residents who leave their children behind, maybe when they're 2, 3 years old. And maybe they're not able to go back to their home country until 20 years later. And so they're going back to a 23-year-old.
yeah.
And or maybe they're able to bring their child once that child's 17. And if there's one thing that we know is that obviously teenagers are always a little bit more on the feisty side, but the level of abandonment that that child has experienced, the feeling of feeling lonely, like maybe their parent didn't love them enough to take them with them, not fully understanding um, that sacrifice, because at that age you shouldn't be expected to understand that.
Yeah.
And for the parent to maybe then feel rejected by their child or feel resentment, like I
Mhm.
sacrificed these things. And so family reunification is extremely important, but it's not necessarily a smooth transition either.
That's right.
And the pain that's there requires a lot of, ideally, a lot of access to mental health resources, to communication, outlets. But that usually these are communities that don't have access to those things. And so some of those violent cycles that their families, fled, it's difficult to get away from that. It's, poverty is a violent Poverty is a verb, right?
Yeah,
Poverty is
yeah,
actual violence
yeah,
against families and children, and it has a way of, it's very difficult to break. And so
yeah.
um, uh, with that being said, I think though it brings us back to this, like, we're a collective, and so although we can't fix these like larger big issues, what impact can we as as a human, as a Prince George's County resident, as a Maryland resident, or as a resident of the world,
Yeah.
how can we be a bridge for someone? How can we be a friend? How can we connect someone? Maybe they have no idea that, like NAMI exists, but, you say, hey, here's this resource, it's private, it's okay. Me, I know you. I wouldn't recommend this if I didn't believe it. Those things are powerful. They
Yeah.
seem small, but these things are life changing, and they can alter someone's course of life. So um, the separation of families is a tough one, and a lot of our nonprofits here in the county work with children who maybe are newly arrived. Maybe they're not even coming here to their parents, but to like an uncle or an aunt. And, they're working closely with them. And so it's also an opportunity, if you're interested, there are definitely a lot of volunteer opportunities out there to get involved. And the more the merrier. I think we have the power to create the community and the type of world that we want to see.
Oh, I love that. It's right. We do have the power to
Mhm.
create the type of community we want. I love that. So, talk to us about, like, what are some of the cultural competencies that we who maybe are not Latino or
Mhm.
Latinx, or cultural differences? Give us, like a few, 4 or 5, something that we should, understand or know.
Mhm. I would say for Central Americans specifically, I think it's more of like a quieter community. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe a little bit more timid, more shy. And so just because maybe they're not the forefront or the loudest person in a room doesn't mean that they're not engaged or that they don't want to be part of something. They may just need like a personal invitation to say, come sit down, it's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Um, I would also say, I mean, it's a very family-oriented community. And so family is extremely important. I think culture as well is really important. And so just there's like little things, right? I think to keep in mind. But I would say that the effort of approaching with kindness, with respect for the other person, is really the key to start the conversation. And then, we have these other things to make sure that everyone is on the same page and has the same understanding of things. That's important as well, whether that's language access, and that, each region also has their own slang. And so certain words won't resonate with other folks, even if it's Spanish. And
Mhm.
those are important things to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, just if you think about different regions in the United States, words don't resonate,
Yes. Yep.
right? So, yeah, it's a really great reminder for us. So looking forward, looking past COVID,
Mhm.
when we have a little more comfort and freedom to move around in the DMV. So so now I'm asking you to put on your, like, cruise ship or your tour guide hat. Like, what are some of the things that once we are free to move around without fear,
Mhm.
what should we do? Where should we go? What museums? What eating places? Without endorsing anyone necessarily, right? You've given us a few, you talk about art, but like if we want to experience North America, very particularly Mexico, Central America, or South America in the DMV, we don't have to jump on a plane, right? What should we do? Because we have things right here.
Listen, I love food. And I love food from all over the world. And
Me
I
too.
would say that in Prince George's County, there is such a variety of different cuisines, and a variety in different cuisines from Latin America. So you can go to, again, not endorsing, but just some places that, if you want to check them out. Mana has great Dominican options. If you want some like some fried cheese, mofongo with rice. There's
I'm
also
so
Dominican.
hungry, Allison. Keep talking.
There's also like a Dominican sushi place that opened up in the county, which is like a fusion. So if you're feeling a
Ooh,
little,
that is
like,
fabulous. You don't think sushi and Dominican. I
you
love
would not,
Yeah.
but it's good. It really works. I would just say you really have to like plantains. If you don't like plantains, it may not be.
I love
alley.
plantains. Oh my goodness, yes.
I do too. And then you have cocineros, which opened up, and that's like this. They're a local county family who have been highlighted actually in the Washington Post. So they're known in the area, and I think that's the special thing about Prince George's County. We have all these like destination spots, right? They opened up across the mall from Prince George. So if you're ever around there, check them out. It's sort of like a modern diaspora take on Salvi and like Mexican food. It's a fusion of those two. You have you have all these different places. You have Mexicana at the harbor, which my colleagues and I really enjoy. So there are a variety of options, and I think food is such a great way to get exposure to cultures, to the different countries, the different styles. I always find that in Latin America, you always have very flour, corn-based food, and they're done in different creative ways: empanadas, tacos, pupusas, rice, but they're uniting. But the fun thing is that they're different, and so such a great opportunity to experience that. And then in DC, you have so many museums. There's I don't know if it's a museum, but they have like a walking tour of Mount Pleasant history, which some folks who used to live in Mount Pleasant now live in Prince George's County due to the rise in housing cost, which is called Ola Cultura. And it's using art as a form to learn about different cultures. So those are some, but this is sort of like a little snippet.
So two are in my head. One, because you described where it is, I can definitely, but I'll be calling you about some of the others, like, Allison, remember when? And I hope that's soon. I know we're in the middle now of our Omicron variant and what that looks like. But for all of those listening, there's hope. We're almost there. We're not there yet. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, but if we're all wise and follow the direction of science and, continue with our masks and washing our hands, we're going to get through this. So, Allison, I thank you for giving us hope, food hope once we're done with it. Right? So I really want to, we're at our time, but I really want to thank you for spending this hour with us, really highlighting, first of all, what you do and the importance of this liaison position from the county executive to our fellow brothers and sisters here in Prince George's County. And so if there's, please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help. Just thank you. And for those that, and for those that are listening, thank you for taking the time to spend with us today, to learn, to grow, to really start thinking about what it means to have made the decision to come to a new place and what all of that entails. And not just a new place, but a new language, new culture, new smells, new taste, like the water. I mean, basic things that we don't think about are, everything is different, and what maybe led to that, and that's all part of the decision. So I hope and pray that we can all have more humanity towards each other, that we can all be kind and compassionate, and when somebody is different from us or doesn't look like us, that we don't discount or negate or diminish, that we are all in this struggle together, the struggle of living, the struggle of finding our place, and to make a better space for our families and for those around us. So that's right. That's what we want. That's what we want everybody to take away and to practice, not just listen, but to start infusing it in our lives. So thank you, Allison. Thank you for everyone who joined us. And please stay safe. Wash your hands, wear your mask inside and outside, and we'll get through this. So thank you. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Bye.